Let's practice our verse today, Philippians 4 through 8. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men, the Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Philippians 4 through 8. How did you do? Did you remember all of those things that we're supposed to think about? Remember our song? Think about the good things and not the bad. Think about the happy and not the sad. Don't think about what you've lost. Think about what you've won. Think about the good things that God has done. You know, this year we've been talking about some different people, and we were talking about Paul. And I want to go back in time to a man that talked for God before Paul came along. And we've kind of jumped around with our Bible lessons this year to follow Christmas and Easter. And we were talking about how Paul traveled all around telling others about God and his love, the one true God. And maybe some of the things he shared were from the life of this man. He's found in Genesis, Exodus. His name is Moses. Now, let's see. Let's go way back. In our kindergarten year, remember we talked about Abraham? He was the father of many nations, and his son Isaac. And then we talked about Jacob and Esau, and we talked about Joseph. Remember his brothers? They weren't very nice to him, and they sold him to some merchants. And where did he end up? Yep, in Potiphar's house. And God used Joseph to help his family later on during the famine. Well, remember that the Bible is full of stories about real people who lived in real places who had real problems. Well, here's another person. His name was Moses. Now, when we meet Moses in the Bible, he's just a little tiny baby. And he lived back in the day when God's people were living under bondage. That means they were slaves. They couldn't do their own thing. They had to do what the ruler, the Pharaoh, told them to do. And there were some pharaohs that were just not very nice. They were wicked. The ruler of Egypt was called a pharaoh, and he had a lot of slaves that worked for him. And these slaves were God's chosen people, the children of Israel. And his family, remember when Joseph came to live in Egypt? Did he choose to go there? No. God worked it all out for him to get there. And God used a bad situation in Joseph's life to put him where he needed to be. Well, the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren, the great-great-great-grandchildren of Joseph and his brothers lived in Egypt now. And as their families got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and people died and people were born. Anyway, all of those people were living in Egypt. So God worked through Joseph's life to bring the people there. Well, their ruler that was over Egypt at that time was very cruel. He didn't remember about Joseph. In fact, he didn't really care about what Joseph had done for those people. And they were living at a time when they were slaves and they worked for Pharaoh. And he was very, very unkind. They had little food, little clothes. The children didn't go to school. And the slave owners were very, very cruel. Well, there were a lot of people living there. And when a lot of people are living in a place, lots of babies are born. Lots of babies. Well, there were so many babies. The Pharaoh decided there were too many babies being born to the slaves, and the ruler thought that soon there would be more slaves than the Egyptians, and he didn't like that. And so he said, all young boys of Joseph's people should be killed. Now at that time, that was a very scary time for the mommies and daddies. Well, a baby was born, and his name was Moses. He had a sister, Miriam, and since Moses was a little boy and the king had ordered that all little boys should be killed, his parents decided to do something very special. They didn't listen to the ruler, they listened to God. And Moses, his mom, made a special little basket, and she hid Moses out in the water in the river. And she told Miriam to go stand by the river and watch so that no one would see her, and just watch the basket. She was babysitting. She babysat her little brother who was floating in the basket in the river. No one had seen the basket, and Moses was safe under the watchful eye of his sister. One day, something strange happened. The princess, the daughter of the Pharaoh, the king, came down to the river to take a bath. And while they were there, she heard something. And she saw something floating in the river. And so she asked her maids to bring the basket to her. And the princess looked in the basket. What did she find? A baby. And she decided that she was going to take care of that baby. She looked at that baby and immediately she loved the baby. And so she wanted to take care of him and make him her own. So she took the baby out of the river, but she needed help. You see, back in those days, princesses did not do things for themselves. They had maids, they had people that helped them, and so she wanted to play and take care of him and love him and make him her own, but she needed some help. And so she decided to find somebody to help her take care of the baby. And as she was talking to her maids, God moved in Miriam's heart to say, I know somebody who can take care of that baby. And Miriam, Moses' sister, who was watching out for him, told the princess that she knew of a nurse, somebody who could take care of the baby. And the princess told her, go get her right now. So Miriam brought the nurse for Moses. Do you know who she brought? His mother. And just think how happy Moses' mother was to see that Moses was okay. And she was going to be able to take care of Moses. Here she had been afraid that the king was going to kill him. But God had another plan. Think about the love of God in caring for Moses and his mama. Only God could plan all those details. Boys and girls, even when bad things happen, or hard things happen, or things we don't like, God is always working. What a wonderful reminder that this story of Moses is. You know what? I think Paul was able to tell those stories about Moses and the children of Israel as he talked and told others about the one true God. Did he keep that story for himself? No, he shared it with people all around the world. Boys and girls, we need to do that too. Think about it. Your mommy and daddy are sharing God's truth with you. So someday you can share it with your children, and your children can share it with their children. What a wonderful reminder that God works all things for His good, but most importantly for His glory. And boys and girls, He takes care of us, from the little tiny babies to the older people. God cares for His people. He always has, and He always will.